The silence at our family dinner table felt heavier than the mahogany itself when my brother Marcus raised his hand and said the words that would change everything. I vote we remove Serafina from the family trust. 23 years of shared memories, scraped knees, and late-night confessions meant nothing as our parents nodded in agreement. But what they didn't know was that I had been carrying a manila folder for 3 months waiting for this exact moment. As Marcus smugly explained why I was financially irresponsible, I simply placed that folder on the table and watched his face drain of all color. Before we dive into this family betrayal that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about blood loyalty, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by family, and don't forget to subscribe because this revenge story gets wilder than you can imagine. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when family secrets come crashing down. Growing up as the youngest in the Blackwood family meant I was always fighting for my place at the table. Our father, William Blackwood, built his commercial real estate empire from nothing, and our mother, Eleanor, came from old Connecticut money. Marcus, being 5 years older, naturally slipped into the role of heir apparent while I was still learning to tie my shoes. The family trust had been established when I turned 18, meant to ensure both Marcus and I would inherit equally when our parents passed. For years, family dinners were pleasant affairs filled with discussions about business ventures, charity galas, and vacation plans to the Hamptons. But something shifted dramatically after I graduated from Columbia with my MBA in finance. It started with small comments. Marcus would mention how I spent too much on my downtown apartment, conveniently ignoring that his penthouse cost 3 times more. He questioned my decision to work at a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for underserved communities instead of joining the family business immediately. Serafina always was the bleeding heart, he would say with that condescending smile that made my skin crawl. The passive aggression escalated when I started dating James, a public school teacher from Queens. Marcus made snide remarks about James's modest income and wondered aloud if I was thinking clearly about my future. Our parents remained diplomatically silent, but I could see the doubt creeping into their eyes during family gatherings. The real turning point came 6 months ago when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. I had stopped by the family office to pick up some documents when I accidentally walked in on Marcus having a heated phone conversation. Through the glass partition, I watched him gesture wildly while speaking in hushed, urgent tones. What I heard next made me freeze in place. "The money transfers need to happen before the quarterly review," Marcus was saying. "If the auditors catch wind of this before I can restructure everything, we are all finished. Serafina cannot find out about the offshore accounts until after we remove her from the trust completely." My heart pounded as I realized what I was witnessing. Marcus was not just planning to cut me out of my inheritance. He was actively embezzling from the family trust. The brother who had lectured me about fiscal responsibility was stealing from our shared future while positioning me as the irresponsible one who deserved to lose everything. That night, I called my college roommate Sarah, who now worked as a forensic accountant for the FBI. Without revealing specific details, I asked her about the red flags to look for in family financial fraud. Her advice was clear: document everything, gather evidence quietly, and prepare for the possibility that the betrayal runs deeper than you think. For the next 3 months, I became a detective in my own family. I started paying closer attention during family business discussions, noting inconsistencies in Marcus's explanations about various investments and expenditures. I volunteered to help with family foundation paperwork, giving me access to financial documents that revealed a pattern of suspicious transactions. The manila folder began to grow thick with bank statements, transfer records, and email printouts that painted a devastating picture. Marcus had been systematically moving money from the family trust into personal accounts disguised as business investments. The offshore shell companies he had created were elaborate fronts designed to hide millions of dollars that should have been split between us. What made his betrayal even more painful was discovering that our parents were not innocent victims. Email exchanges revealed that they were aware of Marcus's financial restructuring and had agreed to support his plan to remove me from the trust entirely. Their reasoning was documented in black and white. They believed Marcus was better suited to handle the family wealth, and my idealistic tendencies made me a liability. The night before that fateful family dinner, I sat in my apartment staring at the folder that contained enough evidence to destroy my family. James found me there at 2 in the morning, surrounded by papers and legal documents. "You know you have to do this," he said gently, wrapping his arms around me. "They made their choice when they decided to steal from you." The weight of that manila folder seemed to grow heavier as I sat at our dining room table watching Marcus deliver his carefully rehearsed speech about my supposed financial irresponsibility. Our parents nodded along as he cited examples of my poor judgment, my charitable donations, my choice to live in a diverse neighborhood instead of the Upper East Side, my relationship with James. "Serafina has always been impulsive with money," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with fake concern. "The trust was meant to protect our family legacy, not fund idealistic ventures that provide no return on investment. Father, Mother, I believe we need to restructure the trust to ensure responsible stewardship." The formal vote was swift and decisive. 3 hands raised against me, sealing what they believed was my financial fate. The smug satisfaction on Marcus's face was unbearable as he began explaining how this decision would ultimately benefit everyone involved, including Serafina herself. That was when I placed the folder on the table. "Before we make any final decisions," I said calmly, "I think everyone should see what responsible stewardship actually looks like." My hands were surprisingly steady as I opened the folder and began laying out bank statements, wire transfer records, and incorporation documents for shell companies I had never heard of until 3 months ago. Marcus's confident expression faltered as he recognized the documents spreading across the mahogany surface. "Serafina, what is this supposed to prove? Some random paperwork does not change the facts about your spending habits." "These are not random papers, Marcus," I replied, my voice gaining strength with each word. "These are records of every fraudulent transaction you have made over the past 2 years. 23 separate wire transfers totaling $4.7 million moved from our family trust into offshore accounts registered under shell companies you created in the Cayman Islands." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. Our parents looked confused, glancing between Marcus and the documents I was methodically arranging in chronological order. "This is Meridian Holdings," I continued, pointing to a bank statement. "Supposedly a real estate investment fund, but actually a personal account you opened using falsified investment prospectuses. And here is Blackwood International Ventures, which our trust invested $2 million in last year for what you claimed was a commercial development project in Miami." I pulled out photographs I had taken during a weekend trip to Florida. "I visited the address listed for this Miami project, Marcus. It is an empty lot that has been for sale for the past 5 years. No construction, no development, no legitimate business whatsoever." Marcus started to stammer some explanation, but I was not finished. The evidence I had collected was overwhelming and methodically organized. Bank records showed money flowing from our family trust into his shell companies, then immediately transferred to personal investment accounts in his name only. Email exchanges with offshore banking representatives revealed the premeditated nature of his fraud. "You have been stealing from our family for years while positioning yourself as the responsible son," I said, my voice now steady and clear. "Every lecture about my spending, every criticism of my choices, Every suggestion that I was not worthy of my inheritance was projection designed to cover up your own criminal behavior. Our mother finally found her voice. Serafina, surely there is some misunderstanding. Marcus would never. Mother, the evidence is right here in front of you, I interrupted, pulling out the most damaging document in the folder. This is an email from Marcus to his financial advisor discussing the timeline for my removal from the trust. The subject line reads, "Eliminating S from equation before audit season." He was planning to steal my inheritance and blame me for financial irresponsibility. The room fell completely silent except for the sound of Marcus's increasingly rapid breathing. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time as he realized the depth of evidence I had assembled against him. "You went through my private communications." He finally managed to say, his voice shaky and defensive. "That is illegal. Whatever you think you found, you obtained it through illegal means." "Actually," I replied calmly, "everything in this folder was obtained through legitimate channels. Financial documents from our shared family trust, public records of your shell company and corporations, and correspondence that you carelessly left accessible on shared family business servers. I did not hack anything or break any laws to uncover your fraud." The realization that his own carelessness had provided me with all the evidence I needed seemed to hit Marcus like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, finally understanding that his years of careful planning and manipulation had been undone by his own arrogance. Our father, who had remained silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Marcus, please tell me there is an explanation for this that makes sense." But Marcus had no explanation that could justify the mountain of evidence spread across our dining room table. The brother who had spent years painting me as irresponsible had been caught red-handed stealing millions of dollars from our family while plotting to blame me for financial instability he had created himself. The immediate aftermath of exposing Marcus's fraud was surreal. Our parents sat in stunned silence while Marcus alternated between denial and desperate attempts to minimize his crimes. But I knew this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. Corporate fraud cases were complex, and Marcus had years to cover his tracks and prepare counter-strategies. The next morning, I called Sarah and asked her to recommend the best financial crimes attorney in New York. She connected me with Rebecca Martinez, a former federal prosecutor who specialized in family financial fraud. Rebecca's office overlooked Central Park, and her walls were lined with commendations from successful prosecutions of white-collar criminals. "Your brother made several critical mistakes," Rebecca explained after reviewing my evidence. "Creating paper trails using shared servers and documenting his intentions in writing. However, he likely has contingency plans we have not discovered yet. Family financial fraud cases can get extremely ugly, especially when significant money is involved." Rebecca's assessment proved prophetic. Within 48 hours of our disastrous family dinner, Marcus hired the most expensive defense attorney in Manhattan and began what she called the standard rich person playbook for handling fraud accusations. First, he claimed the money transfers were legitimate business investments that I was too unsophisticated to understand. When that narrative fell apart under scrutiny of the fake companies and empty lots, he shifted to suggesting that our parents had approved all transactions as part of family financial planning I was not privy to due to my emotional instability. The most insidious part of his strategy was painting me as a disgruntled family member seeking revenge for being removed from the trust. Marcus leaked carefully crafted stories to society gossip columns about family disputes and suggested that I was manipulating evidence to support false accusations against him. But Marcus underestimated how thoroughly I had prepared for this fight. Beyond the financial evidence, I had been building relationships with other people who had been damaged by his schemes. It turned out that Marcus's fraudulent behavior extended far beyond stealing from our family trust. Through Rebecca's investigation, we discovered that Marcus had convinced several family friends to invest in his fake development projects. The Hendersons had lost their retirement savings to Meridian Holdings. The Washingtons had invested their daughter's college fund in Blackwood International Ventures. These were not strangers. These were people who had attended my birthday parties and graduation celebrations, people who trusted our family name. Connecting with Marcus's other victims created a powerful alliance that strengthened our case exponentially. Each family brought additional evidence of his fraudulent schemes, creating a pattern of criminal behavior that would be impossible for even the most expensive defense attorney to explain away. Mrs. Henderson became particularly instrumental in our efforts. As a retired bookkeeper, she had maintained meticulous records of every interaction with Marcus, including recorded phone calls where he made specific promises about guaranteed returns on investments that he knew were fraudulent. "Your brother called my husband personally," Mrs. Henderson told me during one of our strategy meetings. "He said the Blackwood family was offering exclusive investment opportunities to close friends. He used your father's reputation and your family's name to convince us this was a sure thing." The recorded phone calls were devastating evidence. Marcus's voice was clear and confident as he made promises he knew were lies, using our family's reputation as collateral for his criminal schemes. Hearing him manipulate people who trusted us made me realize that his betrayal extended far beyond stealing my inheritance. Our alliance grew stronger as more victims came forward. The country club where our family had been members for generations became a source of additional evidence, as other members admitted they had lost money to Marcus's fake investment opportunities. The pattern was always the same. Marcus would identify wealthy families going through transitions like retirement or college planning, then offer exclusive investment opportunities that promised unrealistic returns. Rebecca worked with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to coordinate with FBI financial crimes investigators. The scope of Marcus's fraud was expanding beyond civil lawsuits into potential federal criminal charges. Wire fraud across state lines and international money laundering through offshore accounts elevated his crimes to felony level with serious prison time possibilities. During this period, I also had to manage the devastating impact on our parents. Our father's health deteriorated rapidly as he realized that Marcus had used his reputation and business relationships to facilitate fraud. Our mother withdrew into herself, barely speaking during family meetings with attorneys and investigators. "I keep thinking about all the warning signs I missed," our father confided to me during one of his lucid moments. The expensive purchases Marcus made that did not align with his actual income, the way he deflected questions about specific business deals, his insistence on handling family financial matters independently. The most heartbreaking part was watching our parents grapple with the reality that they had chosen to support the wrong child. Their decision to vote me out of the family trust was based on Marcus's manipulation and lies, but they had to live with the knowledge that they had actively participated in his scheme against me. James remained my strongest personal support throughout this ordeal. He took leave from his teaching position to help coordinate meetings with attorneys and investigators. His background in education made him particularly effective at organizing complex information and timelines that helped everyone understand the scope of Marcus's crimes. "Your family is going to come through this stronger," James assured me during one particularly difficult evening. "The people who matter are rallying around the truth, and justice is going to prevail." But even as our alliance grew stronger and evidence mounted against Marcus, I could not shake the feeling that he was planning something desperate. Rebecca warned me that cornered criminals often resort to increasingly dangerous tactics, especially when facing potential prison sentences. Marcus had spent years perfecting his manipulation skills, and I worried about what he might do when he realized that his carefully constructed life was collapsing around him. Just when I thought our case against Marcus was ironclad, the unthinkable happened. Mrs. Henderson, who had been our most reliable witness and strongest ally, called an emergency meeting at Rebecca's office. I could tell something was terribly wrong from the moment she walked in. Her usual confident demeanor had been replaced by nervous fidgeting and avoided eye contact. "I need to tell you something that changes everything." Mrs. Henderson began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus contacted me last week. He offered to return double our original investment if I would recant my testimony and destroy the recorded phone calls." My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Marcus was systematically buying off our witnesses using stolen money to silence the very people he had defrauded. But Mrs. Henderson's revelation was just the beginning of a much larger betrayal that would shake me to my core. "There is more," she continued, tears forming in her eyes. "He told me things about your family that made me question everything. Marcus showed me documents suggesting that you knew about the offshore accounts all along and were planning to use this information to steal the entire family fortune for yourself." The forged documents Marcus presented were sophisticated and convincing. He had created fake email exchanges between me and various financial advisors discussing my supposed plan to frame him for fraud, while secretly controlling the stolen money myself. The fabricated evidence painted me as a master manipulator who had orchestrated this entire situation to eliminate Marcus and inherit everything alone. "I know it sounds crazy," Mrs. Henderson said, "but the documents looked so real, and Marcus was so convincing when he explained how you had been planning this for months. He said you were using me and the other victims as pawns in your scheme against him." Rebecca immediately recognized the strategy. "This is classic deflection combined with witness intimidation," she explained grimly. "Marcus is trying to muddy the waters by creating an alternative narrative where Serafina becomes the villain. It is sophisticated and dangerous because it exploits people's natural tendency to question their own judgment when presented with conflicting information." But Mrs. Henderson's wavering loyalty was nothing compared to what happened next. My own father called and asked me to come to the house alone for a private conversation. When I arrived, I found him sitting in his study, surrounded by the same forged documents that Marcus had shown Mrs. Henderson. "Serafina, I need you to tell me the truth," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. "Did you know about Marcus's financial activities before you decided to expose him? Were you planning to use this information for your own benefit?" The betrayal cut deeper than anything Marcus had done to me. My own father was questioning my motives based on obviously fabricated evidence. The man who had raised me, who had taught me about integrity and honesty, was willing to believe that I was capable of the same criminal behavior as Marcus. "Dad, those documents are forgeries," I said desperately. "Marcus is trying to make you doubt me because he knows the real evidence against him is overwhelming. Why would I spend months building a case with multiple witnesses if I was planning to steal money myself?" But doubt had already taken root. Our mother joined the conversation and revealed that Marcus had been feeding them alternative explanations for weeks. He claimed that I had been secretly working with financial advisors to identify vulnerabilities in the family trust. He suggested that my relationship with James was part of a larger plan to gain access to family financial information for fraudulent purposes. The most devastating blow came when my father revealed that he was considering withdrawing support for the criminal investigation entirely. If there is any possibility that this is a family dispute being used to cover up financial crimes by both of you, I cannot allow our family name to be destroyed in a public trial. Marcus's psychological warfare was working perfectly. By creating confusion about my motives and introducing doubt about the evidence, he was successfully fracturing the coalition that had formed against him. The other victim families began questioning their own experiences and wondering if they had been manipulated into supporting false accusations. Even Rebecca started expressing concerns about proceeding with the case. When key witnesses start questioning their own testimony and family members withdraw support, it becomes extremely difficult to convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt, she explained. Marcus has created enough uncertainty that he might escape serious consequences entirely. The lowest point came when James suggested that maybe we should step back and reconsider our approach. I am not saying Marcus is innocent, he clarified quickly. But the stress this is putting on you and your family relationships might not be worth it. Maybe there is a way to resolve this privately without destroying everyone involved. Sitting alone in my apartment that night, surrounded by evidence that I knew was real and truthful, I felt more isolated than ever before. Marcus had successfully turned my own allies against me by exploiting their natural desire to avoid conflict and their willingness to believe there might be truth in his alternative narrative. The brother who had stolen millions of dollars and destroyed multiple families' financial security was successfully painting himself as the victim of a vindictive sister's elaborate revenge plot. His years of practice manipulating family dynamics and exploiting people's trust were serving him well in this ultimate test of his skills. But what Marcus did not realize was that his latest strategy contained the seeds of his own destruction. In his desperation to discredit me, he had made new mistakes that would provide fresh evidence of his criminal behavior. The forged documents he had created were sophisticated, but they contained subtle inconsistencies that a skilled forensic analyst could identify and prove were fabrications. More importantly, his attempts to buy off witnesses and intimidate family members constituted new crimes that could be prosecuted independently of the original fraud charges. Marcus's desperation was leading him to make increasingly reckless decisions that would ultimately seal his fate. As I sat in the darkness of my apartment, I realized that this betrayal by my closest allies was not the end of my fight for justice. It was the beginning of a new phase that would require different strategies and unexpected sources of support. My salvation came from the most unlikely source imaginable. 3 days after my world seemed to collapse completely, I received a phone call from someone I had not spoken to in over 5 years. My cousin Diana Marcus's ex-wife, who had divorced him 2 years earlier after what everyone assumed was a simple case of growing apart. Serafina, I have been following the news about Marcus and the fraud investigation, Diana said carefully. I think it is time I told you why I really divorced your brother. Can we meet somewhere private where we can talk without being overheard? We met at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from any place where family or their associates might recognize us. Diana looked tired but determined as she pulled out a tablet containing what she described as insurance files she had been maintaining throughout her marriage to Marcus. I discovered Marcus's criminal activities 2 years before I filed for divorce, Diana explained. I started documenting everything because I knew that eventually his schemes would collapse, and I needed to protect myself from being implicated in his crimes. The evidence Diana had collected was comprehensive and devastating. As Marcus's wife, she had access to personal financial records, private communications, and documentation that went far beyond what I had been able to gather independently. Her files included offshore bank statements showing the actual destination of stolen funds, recorded conversations between Marcus and his criminal associates, and photographic evidence of forged documents being created. Marcus is not just stealing from your family, Diana continued. He has been running multiple fraud schemes simultaneously. The investment scams targeting your family friends were just one piece of a much larger criminal enterprise involving money laundering, tax evasion, and securities fraud. The scope of Marcus's criminal behavior was staggering. Diana's evidence showed that he had been stealing from client accounts at his legitimate business, creating fraudulent tax shelters for wealthy individuals and using our family's reputation to facilitate access to exclusive investment opportunities that he then corrupted for his personal benefit. Most importantly, Diana had documentation proving that all of Marcus's recent attempts to discredit me were fabricated. She had recordings of phone calls where Marcus discussed his plan to create forged evidence implicating me in financial crimes. She had email exchanges with the document forger he hired to create the fake communications that had convinced our parents and Mrs. Henderson to doubt my credibility. I stayed quiet for 2 years because I was afraid of what Marcus might do to me if he discovered that I knew about his crimes, Diana admitted. But watching him destroy your family and manipulate everyone into believing his lies made me realize that my silence was enabling him to hurt innocent people. Diana's decision to come forward was motivated by more than just family loyalty. She revealed that Marcus had been threatening her with financial ruin if she ever spoke about their marriage or his business practices. He had been using his knowledge of her personal vulnerabilities to keep her silent, but watching him employ the same manipulation tactics against me had finally pushed her to act. Rebecca immediately recognized the value of Diana's evidence. "This is exactly what we need to rebuild credibility and demonstrate the pattern of Marcus's criminal behavior," she said. "Having an insider witness who can authenticate documents and provide context for his schemes changes everything." The forensic analysis of Diana's evidence revealed the sophisticated nature of Marcus's criminal enterprise. He had been using advanced money laundering techniques to hide stolen funds across multiple jurisdictions. His fraud schemes were coordinated with other white-collar criminals who provided services like document forgery, offshore banking, and witness intimidation. Armed with Diana's evidence, we were able to prove conclusively that Marcus's recent attempts to discredit me were themselves criminal acts. The forged documents he had shown to our parents and Mrs. Henderson contained digital fingerprints that could be traced back to the same document creation software found on Marcus's personal computer. The investigation also revealed that Marcus had been secretly recording family conversations for years, gathering information that he could use to manipulate family dynamics when needed. His decision to remove me from the family trust was not a recent development based on concerns about my financial responsibility. It was part of a long-term plan he had been developing since I graduated from college. When we presented this new evidence to our parents, the impact was immediate and profound. Seeing proof that Marcus had been manipulating them for years, combined with recordings of him laughing about their gullibility, finally broke through the psychological hold he had maintained over them. "I feel like I am seeing my son clearly for the first time in years," our father said after reviewing Diana's documentation. "The person I thought I knew never existed. Marcus has been playing a character designed to exploit our love and trust." Mrs. Henderson and the other victim families also experienced profound relief when they learned that their doubts about my credibility had been manufactured by Marcus's deliberate psychological manipulation. The recordings Diana provided included Marcus discussing specific strategies for undermining each witness's confidence in their own experiences. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office upgraded the charges against Marcus to include racketeering, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The federal prosecutors became interested in his case as part of a larger investigation into organized financial crimes involving offshore money laundering networks. "Your brother was not operating independently," the lead federal investigator explained during a briefing meeting. "He was part of a network of white-collar criminals who provide services for wealthy individuals seeking to hide assets and avoid legal consequences for financial crimes." Diana's evidence had transformed our family dispute into a major federal criminal investigation with implications extending far beyond our personal situation. Marcus's crimes were now understood as part of a larger pattern of systematic fraud that had damaged dozens of families and violated numerous federal laws. But perhaps the most important outcome of Diana's revelations was the restoration of family relationships that Marcus had poisoned with his manipulation. Our parents finally understood how thoroughly they had been deceived, and they committed to supporting the investigation and prosecution of Marcus's crimes, regardless of the personal cost to our family's reputation. The final confrontation came 6 months later in a federal courthouse in Manhattan, where Marcus faced a jury of 12 ordinary citizens who would determine his fate. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Financial records recorded conversations, witness testimony, and forensic analysis of forged documents created an airtight case that even his expensive legal team could not dispute. Diana's testimony was particularly devastating. She calmly and methodically explained how Marcus had operated his criminal enterprise, detailing the psychological manipulation techniques he used to control family members and exploit victims' trust. Her insider knowledge of his methods provided context that helped the jury understand the deliberate and calculated nature of his crimes. The most dramatic moment came when prosecutors played recordings of Marcus discussing his plans to frame me for financial crimes while laughing about how easily he could manipulate our parents' emotions. The jury watched him describe family members as useful idiots who could be controlled through carefully crafted lies and emotional manipulation. Marcus's defense strategy crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. His attorneys had no choice but to argue for leniency rather than innocence, claiming that family pressure and business stress had driven him to make poor decisions that escalated beyond his control. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: racketeering money, laundering securities, fraud, wire fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced Marcus to 15 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling over $12 million. Mr. Blackwood, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of family trust and social responsibility, the judge said during sentencing. You used your position of privilege and your family's reputation to facilitate systematic fraud that damaged multiple families and corrupted legitimate business relationships. The immediate aftermath of Marcus's conviction brought both relief and grief to our family. Our parents struggled with complex emotions, satisfaction that justice had been served, but profound sadness about losing a son to his own criminal behavior. The brother I had grown up with was gone, replaced by the reality of who he had always been beneath his carefully constructed facade. The financial recovery process took months, but Diana's documentation helped authorities trace and recover most of the stolen funds. The offshore accounts Marcus had created were seized, and his domestic assets were liquidated to provide restitution to victims. Mrs. Henderson and the other families received full compensation for their losses, along with interest and damages. More importantly, the investigation led to the dismantling of the larger criminal network Marcus had been working with. Federal prosecutors used information from his case to pursue charges against document forgers, offshore banking facilitators, and other white-collar criminals who had enabled his schemes. Our family trust was restructured with independent oversight and transparency requirements designed to prevent future fraud. I was reinstated with full inheritance rights, but more significantly, our family relationships were rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect that had been missing for years. The experience fundamentally changed how I understood family loyalty and personal responsibility. Blood relationships do not automatically create trust. Trust must be earned through consistent, honest behavior over time. Marcus had spent years exploiting our assumption that family members inherently deserved unconditional support regardless of their actions. James and I married 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, with Diana serving as my maid of honor and our parents providing their full blessing and support. Our wedding was small and intimate, focused on celebrating genuine relationships built on trust and mutual respect, rather than social obligations or family expectations. I returned to my work in financial literacy education with renewed purpose, using my experience to help other families recognize and prevent financial fraud. The nonprofit I worked for expanded its programs to include education about family financial crime and resources for victims seeking justice and recovery. Diana became one of my closest friends and strongest advocates, channeling her experience into victim advocacy work that helped other families navigate the complex process of exposing and prosecuting white-collar crime. Her courage in coming forward inspired other witnesses to speak truth to power despite personal risks and family pressure. Our parents dedicated their remaining years to philanthropy and community service, working to repair the damage Marcus's crimes had done to our family's reputation through positive contributions to society. They established scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds and funded financial literacy programs in public schools. The final piece of justice came when Marcus was released from prison 5 years early for good behavior, only to discover that his criminal conviction had destroyed all his professional licenses and business relationships. The million-dollar lifestyle he had stolen to maintain was gone forever, replaced by the reality of rebuilding his life with the burden of being a convicted felon. Looking back on this experience, I realized that the most important victory was not Marcus's imprisonment or the financial recovery. It was discovering who truly deserved my trust and loyalty. James, Diana, Rebecca, and ultimately our parents proved their character through their actions during our family's darkest period. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was betraying you behind your scenes? How did you find the courage to expose the truth, even when everyone around you doubted your story? Drop your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories of overcoming family betrayal inspire me every day. If this revenge story resonated with you, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more real-life drama where justice actually prevails. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that standing up for truth is always worth the fight, even when it feels like you are standing alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to justice. Remember that family loyalty should never require you to enable criminal behavior or sacrifice your own integrity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions, even when those people share your DNA. Until next time, keep fighting for truth and never let anyone convince you to doubt your own experiences.